So the big talk last week was the Chamath interview with Scott Wapner on CNBC. And basically Wapner said, like, are you saying the airline should fail? And Chamath said yes. And Wapner said why? And that was the video that just blew up this week.
It has like 10 million views. So he said, on Main Street today, people are getting wiped out. Right now, rich CEOs are not. Boards that have horrible governance are not. People are. And he said, what we've done is disproportionately prop up poor-performing CEOs and boards, and you have to watch these people out. And this thing, people were sharing it left and right. It obviously, he tapped into something here. I don't know this guy personally. I've seen him a few times. Here's my thought on this. He obviously tapped into something that people are really angry about, and I think a lot of that anger still stems from '08. This guy is a billionaire as well. He made a bunch of money in tech. He's part owner of the Warriors. I think there's some billionaire virtue signaling going on here where billionaires don't mind seeing other rich people lose their money. That's just a human urge, I think. Regardless, and you could point to some of the stuff he said. He's basically saying, let all these companies go bankrupt. I found a story someone shared on Twitter that he said the employees will be fine. It'll just be the equity owners and the debt holders who lose money here. But this report found they looked at a bunch of companies that have been gone to.
By the way, Chamath is on behind you. You can't see, but he's on CNBC right now. We're talking about this.
Of course they are. It's a huge. It tapped into a huge groundswell of anger. But they found this study said that an employee's annual earnings of the company who was in bankruptcy compared to their pre-earnings, by the first year their earnings falls 10%. By 7 years, it falls by a present value of 67% from their pre-bankruptcy earnings. So, letting all these companies fail, yes, it sounds good. Let's punish the rich people. You're still punishing the employees too. But I get why people are mad. I think a lot of the solutions people are saying are not there. And I think there's that old quote where it's like, let's not let a good crisis go to waste. So now that we're in a crisis, people are putting out all of their thoughts on the way the world works and their political views, and so people are getting mad about stock buybacks and executive compensation and all this other stuff, and I totally get that. I just don't know if this is the time to be airing that stuff out because things are so bad. But I get why people are mad, and I think a lot of it stems from the fact that we really bungled the 2008 response, and homeowners didn't get bailed out, and none of the bankers went to jail. And that was more or less this corporate bailout of the banking system, and now they're all fine, and a lot of people were severely hurt from that. So I get why people are mad. I just don't know if his prescription for this is the right approach.
There's no good solutions here because there's no good choices, and I'm just happy that I don't want to be in the position to make these decisions because they're not easy.
No.
One of the things that's sort of nasty, actually, before we get to that, so Chamath said when a company fails, it does not fire its employees, and I sort of raised my eyebrows at that because I don't know exactly what he's talking about there, but isn't that exactly what happens when a company fails? How could their employees? I didn't get that one, but
yeah,
people tend to, like you just said, it was virtue signaling. It's hard to know what somebody's true intentions are. So a lot of the times, like people say things and then it gets personal and you get attacks. And Twitter has gotten like a lot nastier lately.
Yes.
And I mute in a bull market if somebody says something that is rude or whatever. Like I only really block if it's just really personal and aggressive. But
you
if they
and a
say
bull blocking a bear, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Rule of thumb.
So I block in a bear, and I got an email from somebody that I blocked, and you said you did too. And I only blocked because it was a nasty comment. And he said something like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I was being sarcastic. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't even think that you would see it." And I think that the people behave on Twitter the way that they do in their car.
Yeah.
When it just changes the chemicals in your brain where you'll curse, you'll scream, and you would never just behave that way in real life. Like you would never in normal conversation say this to somebody. So getting back to the bankruptcy stuff, I get it. I think like there are some real issues. Executive compensation is totally out of control, but are you really bailing out the hedge funds? Because, like, for instance, airlines are down 70%. Aren't they already wiped out? At this point, you're protecting the workers. You're protecting the economy. Are all of the airlines going to go bankrupt? Of course not. They're all going to are they going to go bankrupt and disappear? No, they'll do some reorgs and stuff. But people are going to get really hurt. And it's not the hedge funds. it's the investors and it's the employees. So
Yeah, guess what? Those hedge funds that they've already collected on all those fees, they're going to be fine no matter what happens to their investments.
Yeah, so I'm sympathetic to the anger, but I just think it's misplaced this time. But there are definitely going to be some people that benefit that don't deserve it, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, that is unfortunate, but I think that there's going to be companies that went into this and they would have run into trouble in a few years because of their debt profile, and they're going to be bailed out, and it stinks. And because I do think we talked about this before. I think the wealth inequality stuff is going to get worse from this, and I think people are going to come out of this even more angry than they did in a way, because even though Congress has pushed through these fiscal stimulus checks, and people are being helped out like they've never been helped out before, this is just a bridge for them. This isn't going to help them. People who lost their job, they're going to be affected for a long time. So, I mean, the stock market will come back eventually. The bond markets will be fine. That stuff will continue to function and it will recover. But guess what? Someone's life may not recover quite as fast as the stock market does when this comes back and this recession is over. They don't just get to hit green light and get a job back on day one. I'm hopeful that companies are still going to hire, but it's going to be a long time. And people who have had their lives disrupted from this, they probably deserve to be angry and say, "Where's my bailout?" Why couldn't so they're doing the small business loans at 50 basis points or 1%? Why couldn't they make those loans available to individual? You can borrow up to $10,000, and we'll charge you 50 basis points of interest. Why not?
Because they have to do credit quality checks on millions of Americans.
They're not doing that on small businesses, and they're going to forgive the loans. Why not give anyone who wants a $10 million loan, and guess what? In 5 years, write half of them off. I mean, if you want to like really help people get through this and make, if you're worried about moral hazard and not just giving people money, anyone who wants to borrow some money and needs it, why not? If you're going to do it for businesses, I don't see the problem. Maybe they need some more rules on this stuff. And I did read through the Federal Reserve press release, and they said firms seeking Main Street loans must commit to make reasonable efforts to maintain payroll and retain workers, which seems to leave a lot of wiggle room. But they said borrowers must also follow compensation, stock repurchase, and dividend restrictions that apply to direct loan programs under the CARES Act. They have some of these rules in here. It sounds like they're pretty vague. I'm sure the companies will find workarounds. I wish they were going to be a little harsher on that stuff in terms of putting in place a CEO to average pay cap, or some of these things to make things a little easier, because you talked about the cruise ships and the airlines, they've gotten hammered. Like he talked about the fact that, listen, you bought into these investments and they're risky, but some of those companies are, energy companies are down 80-90%. Some of these cruise ships and airlines are down 60-70-80%. So the risk has been seen in those companies. It's just I do think, why can't we take some equity in these companies? That's like the Mark Cuban idea, which makes a lot of sense to me. They could be a little more stringent on how they're doling out this money and giving a few more, just to make sure that when this thing recovers and you do make it through, that you're not taking advantage of the government because they helped you out.